Alright, so I'm going to be talking more about Midnight of the Century and how development's going for it. There was a bit of a lull for a while after Christmas, but I've started to get back into it now, started to pick up the design, the mechanics again, and things are moving, and I'm excited about some recent developments. So I've spoken before about how injury and healing works in Midnight of the Century. So every failed save would reduce the ability score that you used to make that save. So I started thinking about how critical damage works in Into the Odd and Cairn, because this is a game that's derived from Cairn and Into the Odd and Liminal Horror. And in those games, there's a concept of critical damage. So if you deplete your HP or resilience in the case of Rune Cairn, that's kind of your temporary ability to avoid damage. And that gets depleted during combat. But there's no equivalent figure because there's no combat in Midnight of the Century. So I was thinking about where it came to critical damage. Would that translate? So there's the concept of fracture in Midnight of the Century, and I decided to play around with combining fracture and the idea of critical damage. So previously, if any of your ability scores are reduced to zero, body, mind, will, the character would die, essentially be no longer controllable by the player. Now I'm playing around with having you need to make a fracture roll if any ability score reaches zero. And there's going to be three different fracture tables depending on what ability score triggered the fracture. So for instance, if you were reduced to zero in body, then there would be a table that you rolled on. Anything from death to permanent damage or loss of a limb, that sort of thing. So this is the part I'm still working out. And I'm playing through different versions and different revisions. But the idea is that every time you experience fracture, it changes you in some significant way. That there needs to be that kind of cause and effect. So experience fracture, and that changes you. So whether or not you survive, that's one thing. But there's going to be some permanent, not necessarily damage, but some permanent change in your character. So that led me to also think about when it comes to the big confrontation. So when during your investigation you confront the killer that you've been hunting, because it's a non-combat game and because just from the nature of having a one-on-one confrontation with a killer, your chances are you're not going to walk away in one piece, or you're not going to walk away unchanged. So I decided to kind of make the obvious connection and say that for anytime you confront killer one-on-one, that you experience fracture. So you need to roll on the table. So what I'm working on is like, how does that look? Like, is that going to be kind of GM facing, like more warden facing when it comes to what table to roll on? Or is it going to be more mechanical? So essentially that boils down to, is it going to be narrative led or is it going to be mechanic led? So if you've tracked a killer to their lair and you go in on your own to confront them, would you roll on the body table, since if you're tussling with them, would that translate into a body roll? Or is it a battle of wits? So do you have to lure them out? Or is it a will roll? Like, do you need to overcome some kind of occult or supernatural curse or supernatural phenomenon or presence in order to successfully confront the killer? So, and that would determine whether or not you roll on body, mind, or will. Or is it going to be up to the GM or up to the warden to say what's the equivalent or what's the appropriate table to roll on? And then, of course, I've got to populate those tables to have interesting and significant changes in what that would look like. So that's kind of the most recent thing I've been looking at. I've also been working on fleshing out the items and equipment. And what's been really fun is writing up 90s technology. So pagers, payphones, fax machines, personal computers, that sort of thing. Because there's no mobile phones, or there are, but for the purpose of the game, they're going to be rare and essentially out of reach for the investigators. Working at how does that affect gameplay? How does that affect the investigations? What do they look like? What are they described as? So that's kind of the fun bit. looking at 90s technology, 80s and 90s technology. Because as with anything, in the 90s, like, people still used old technology. They didn't use brand new stuff that just came out in like 1996. There was, like, people using stuff for decades, and technology was still in use that was older than that. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of current, what I've been actively working on and actively writing and working out. So let me know if that sounds interesting, if that sounds like something that you would have fun playing, or if those are the kind of dynamics and mechanics that interest you. And please follow along, and I'll be making more of these videos as development progresses. Thanks.